SAS demonstration, Reading in Data 3. In this demonstration, we will look in more detail at the length statement and the in-file options LRECL and misover. In the first example, I'm reading in a small external data set called class. The code is first shown without the length statement. So I'm reading in a data set, and it's an external file called class. And the first time I'm reading it in, I'm not using any length statement. As I said in the demonstration reading SAS data 2, the length statement allows character variables to be longer than the default width of 8 characters. And the length statement comes before the input statement. So the length of the variable is set up before the variable is read. I want to show you what happens if we read the code in without the length statement. Here we have 5 variables that we're reading in: last name, gender, age, height, and systolic blood pressure. And so notice that some of these last names, this is what the data set looks like, are longer than 8 characters long. So if we run this code and look at the output, we see that what happens is without a length statement, SAS prints out the name and only includes 8 characters in the display. So some of these names are cut off. You don't see the full last name. Notice we do have a couple of missings here. And if we go back and look at our program, we see that there were some missing variables for some of the observations. Now let's run the exact same code with a length statement. So here we've added a length statement. Notice the length statement must come before the input statement. And we're telling SAS that last name should have a width of 12, or a length of 12 digits or characters. So if we rerun this code, we now see that our variable last name, or L name, appears with 12, a width of 12, so that the full last name is displayed. Another type of option that's very helpful is the LRECL option. So if you have data on a record that is past the position 256, you need to increase the logical record length, or we call it LRECL, to a larger value to read the data in correctly. Here I'm also including on the in-file statement an OBS option so that I only read in 6 observations, the first 6 observations of data from this data set. Now SAS by default reads in characters out to position 256. So if we have variables that are further out than 256 characters in width, we need to tell SAS to go out further to look for that variable. So here, in this example, we are creating a data set called temp, and all we're inputting in is one variable that's out in column 260. The variable is called joint pain, or JNT pain, and we have an in format. It's 2 dot, so the variable is 2 digits wide, and there are no numbers to the right of the decimal point. So in our in-file statement, we're using 2 options, the LRECL option, and we're telling SAS to extend the record width to 500. We could have said 1,000 or 2,000. Again, SAS can accommodate very, very wide records. But for our purposes, we're just saying 500. And then we want SAS to only read in the first 6 observations into the data set that we're creating called temp. So let's read this in. And we see here that we've read in the data using this LRECL option. Now if we were to look at the log and go up, we see that 6 records were read from the data set tums.txt. Notice here the minimum record length was 385. So these records were 385 columns wide. And we were reading our variable joint pain from column 260. And so by giving the LRECL option of 500, we are extending out the width of the record to a possible 500, although in this case our raw data only went out to column 385. But 385 is bigger than the default record width of 256. The last example I want to show you has to do with missing data. So we're going to take a very simple example of some data called missing.text. And these variables are just going to be called x, y, and z. And so we're just reading in three numbers, x, y, and z, and there are 4 observations. But notice that for the second observation, there's no data for variable z in the second observation. So let's see what happens if we just run this code. So we're bringing in this external file, missing.txt, and we're inputting the variables x, y, and z. And we're creating a data set called missing. Let's see what happens if we run this code. Well, here's what our data looks like. It looks kind of weird. The program ran, but we expected 4 observations, and we only got 3 observations in our data set. And so this is not what we expected. We expected 4 observations. So the first thing I would do when I see a situation like this is I'm going to look at my log. And it says here, here's our code, that 4 records were read in. The minimum record length was 3, the maximum record length was 7. SAS went to a new line when the input statement reached past the end of a line. And so basically what SAS did is, because there was a data missing for the second observation, it went on to the third line to pick up that data. And so you see in the output, we have our first observation is 1, 2, 3, and our second observation is 4, 5, and then SAS picked up the 6 from the third observation. So if we go back, SAS picked up the 6 from the third observation. So we have 2 observations, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, and then SAS went to the 4th line of data to read in the third observation. So SAS went and read in 9, 10, 11 as the third observation. And so the misover option is used to prevent SAS from going to the next line to complete a case if it did not find enough values on a given line of raw data. So this misover option goes with the infile statement, and if we now run the code, we see that our data appears correct. We have 4 observations. Our second observation is missing the variable z. So the misover option is used to prevent SAS from going to the next line to complete a case if it did not find enough values on a given line of raw data. The misover option will often correct problems in reading raw data that are separated by blanks when the number of cases reported by SAS is less than expected. And the way you can diagnose this problem is by looking at your log. This ends SAS demonstration reading in Data 3.